I do think that's one of the examples of a team being better than a whole, like a Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, you and Marv Wolfman. The Titans was something special. So you probably get this question a lot: will we ever see the Titan graphic novel?
No. In fact, I had told Marv that the book was dead before before DC officially said that it was dead. Finally, DC sent a letter saying that they were canceling the Titans graphic novel. I think a month after I said it was canceled, and that there would be no further. They weren't asking for any of the money advanced to me back or anything else. They just decided to cut their losses when they realized that, in addition to my having no real desire to finish it, the fact that the story was such an anachronism, was out of date. There were characters who were now long dead who were still active participants in the Titan storyline in that graphic novel, to make it a story that just didn't fit anywhere. I had told Marv if he wanted to have it finished by someone else and do it as an Elseworlds or whatever he wanted to do, he had my permission, my blessing, as does DC. They own the characters. I don't. I think DC has opted not to, and the artwork is being returned to me.
I guess it was pretty sad when they changed Joey Jericho into a villain.
There were a few things that they did that I particularly didn't care for, but the one thing, even with the emotional stake I had in some of those characters, I didn't own them, and I had to be able to divorce them and go on. I have not read any Teen Titans book that I have myself did not work on, not because of any dislike for what's being done, but it's just that I would always feel that no matter how good a taste the person had, to walk into my own home and see my furniture moved around just wouldn't sit right with me, even if their taste is better, particularly if their taste was better than mine. So I just opted to back away, and I've heard a lot of stories of what's been going on both with Titans and with Wonder Woman, and if they were my characters, of course I could have stopped them. Since I can't, there's nothing I can do by crying about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be doing in the future besides Gladiator. Something about a Giant Man?
Yes, I'm writing a 4-part Giant Man miniseries. Originally, it was supposed to be a standalone miniseries. Now it's a flip book to 4 issues of the Avengers. I'm working with artist Jeffrey Moore and inker Tim Zahn, D-Z-O-N. And I never know exactly how to pronounce that. And Ralph Macchio and Richard Ashford had called me since, ironically, because they remembered all the stuff that I did with the character when I was doing the Avengers, or which I had to remind them that Hank Pym was never Giant Man during any of the times I did the Avengers. So, but they liked my approach to it. What I did was go back to Hank Pym's Ant-Man roots by making it a homage both to the 1950s horror movies and the 1950s horror comics. And since he was Giant Man and he was Ant-Man, I was always surprised that they never did a story with Hank Pym featuring giant ants. So the title of the first issue is Them Again. The title of the second issue is The Incredible Shrinking Giant Man. Then we have Attack of the 50-Foot Jan and Hank the Giant Killer. So we're having a lot of fun with the character, because I really was, when they offered it to me, the biggest challenge was, now how am I going to make Hank Pym's Giant Man interesting when giants aren't exactly all that exciting when you get down to a world full of mutants, hulks, magical characters of all kind. What makes a giant any more interesting than they are? And finally found that hook by making it a touch of fun. Some of the characters are named after characters in 1950s horror movies. And I wanted to deal with the relationship between Hank and Janet Van Dyne. So that was, in fact, became the one thing I insisted on. I really wanted to work on, as their relationship as the core of the story. And they okayed that to the point that we will get the characters back together. And I'm a romantic at heart. That was the thing that cinched it for me. The covers to Giant Man 1 through 4 or Avengers whatever is basically one big headshot of Giant Man divided into 4 parts. So even then, I had to make something giant to make that work. After speaking with Ralph Macchio, he seems to be happy with the fact that my heart and enthusiasm is in the right place. I'm not much into angst comics, although Hank is known for having a lot of angst. But I like to have something go right with him. One of the things one character who's making an appearance there is Scott Lang's Ant-Man. Any person who's ever had connection with the Pym particles is making some kind of appearance. And I wanted to deal with a bit of the one touch of angst and irony is when Scott Lang and Hank are talking to each other, and Scott, for those who don't know, Scott Lang's Ant-Man character is currently leader of the Fantastic Four, replacing Reed Richards. It has been established in the Avengers by Jim Shooter that Hank Pym had a touch of jealousy towards Reed Richards. And taking it from Hank Pym's point of view, wouldn't it just bug me a little bit if after the death of Reed Richards, he's replaced by my replacement? Suddenly, why didn't they ask him to replace Reed Richards? No, they have Scott Lang replacing Reed Richards, and playing with things like that, little bits of irony that when I told Ralph and Richard, said, you know, we didn't think of that little twist before. You know, I like playing around with the personalities. You know, what would you feel if you were caught in that situation?
Is there any mainstream comic you would like to take over, like on a monthly basis?
If given the creative freedom that doesn't necessitate having to constantly do crossover books on a regular schedule or having to guest star the newest hot character. As a child, one of my favorite comics was The Legion of Superheroes. And I'm sure to anyone who knows me, that's absolutely no surprise. And I would have loved to have done The Legion of Superheroes during that really silly stage when they had those, you know, those costumes that were designed probably by either Kurt Swan or James Ford, or John Ford, excuse me, during the 60s. And then when Dave Cockrum did those great designs in the 1970s. Yes, those are the Legions I grew up with. I guess, like everyone who reads comics, you remember mostly the ones that got you into comics, that made you become such a fan of comics. And I remember every time I picked up The Legion of Superheroes, a friend of mine and I at school would constantly discuss every issue that came out. But then again, we were also kids who loved Lost in Space more than Star Trek at the time. So it kind of showed you how juvenile we actually were. But it's a type of thing that I really enjoyed, those characters, even with the silly names, you know, even with the silly rules of, you know, once you're 18, you're out. And, you know, talk about a real generation comment there. And of course, like when Dream Girl came in, I remember, oh yes, adolescence was starting to creep in just as Dream Girl was coming into the storylines. All these things you remember, and I think the irony of that, with all the team books I've done, the team book that meant the most to me as a child is the one I have never done. Is that someday wouldn't it have been nice to have rectified that one little mistake in my choice. I should have done at least one Legion during my career.
As a Legion fan, I would have loved to have seen it. Mm-hmm. So, any chance of getting new Saxon Violence?
As much as I would love to do Saxon Violence, and I'll be talking to Peter David later on today. He said he wants to talk to me about something about SNV. My schedule is right now so full that I have to be very wary what I say, whether I can or can't do it. At this point, I have my job. The ones I have laid out will keep me busy for at least 2 years. So I'm caught in a situation where I would love to do more Saxon Violence, but I don't know where I'm going to fit it. I suggested to Peter that we should do a prose Saxon Violence story and piggyback it on a trade paperback reprinting the first 4 stories, and I can do some illustrations there so you can get a new story, but that doesn't require me to have to draw a full issue or 4 full issues.
Well, it sounds like you're staying busier than ever.
Oh, and I'm loving every moment. What a great time to be in this business.
That's good. Well, I appreciate your spending your time with us.
Oh,
and enjoy.
My pleasure. Yes, thank you very much. It was a lot of fun.
It's Jesse Jackson with the Comic Book Show.
Bye.